Welcome to today's episode of The Growth Zone. I am Christian Bartsch. What is the core benefit of listening to this show? Business leaders in corporate and privately held companies gain insights into trends and strategies that provide them with a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Each episode focuses on an area such as marketing, sales, innovation, or funding that is absolutely critical to the growth of companies, whether they are startups or corporate global players, where management needs to juggle the challenges of market entry or knowing how to navigate the uncertainties of disruptive developments. Mind-feeding is where clarity evolves and helps solving organizational challenges. For those who listen to the entire episode, I have a special surprise gift. I am working on some great guests that are industry leaders in management, innovation, and marketing. Let's get started on today's episode. So today I'm with Darius, and we'll be talking today about how can we get core values increase the profitability of a company. Before we go into our topic deep, Darius, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Christian. I'm a serial entrepreneur and high growth CEO here in the United States. I've been building in the mortgage banking and servicing industry over the last 20 years, which is, as you can imagine, is not a very sexy business, but it can be a very profitable business. And what I learned is that in the financial services space, it's very commoditized, the way people think and the way people operate. It's very operationally driven, and so I found that I got very interested in how can I motivate my team to perform better. And for me, that the tool I used was a combination of different frameworks, but the foundation of those frameworks became the use of core values, operationalizing core values in those businesses, and then leveraging that to create high performance, high growth, and high profitability.
Yes, that's definitely a very interesting aspect of what you're doing, and taking that in consideration with our topic, I think it's quite good to go and look into it. I've got here for us 3 questions that will help us guide through our conversation. That's how companies can find core values that properly reflect their mission. Secondly, the process of building a core value-driven information organization, and why this alignment is one of the most powerful tools an organization can have in their back pocket. So, Darius, how can companies actually find their core values and use them so that they really properly reflect their mission?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention I'm also the author of my new book called The Core Value Equation. That just went, its worldwide release was September 15th. And so we dive into 5 different areas in the book. And the areas that we cover are, and this is all around this idea of how do you use this framework of core values to maximize growth and recruit top talent and really, win compared to your competition. And so what I say is that the problem that's happened with core values is that the word core values and the idea around core values in business has been hijacked by marketing and HR professionals, and not in a bad way, but just in a way that minimizes their value to a certain degree and doesn't maximize their potential and utility value in an organization. And when they did that, they didn't approach it from the strategic standpoint of how can I create more profitability and more impact with these. They thought about it from their own lens of, well, how can I build a company that looks good to the outside world, leveraging these assets, or how can I use these to have maybe a better culture or to explain things to the employees in a slightly more transparent way than if you don't do it. And I'm not saying those are bad things. I actually think those are important things too, but I think they're far from the most important reason why you do it. And so because of that, what's happened with core values is that most people do a typical process of discover, which is a well-worn path, which we'll touch on here in a second. They then roll out. Usually it's a mediocre rollout to the team and maybe to their customers. And then there's little, if any, implementation thereafter. And what I'd say to CEOs and professionals, I said, if you treated any other product in your business that way, what do you expect the result would be? So my question to you, Christian, is what do you think if I treated any product in my business with that type of intentionality, general basic discovery process, no real design, I roll it out to my clients, maybe I follow up with them a little bit. What do you think the result of that would be?
The whole thing would just be a shambles. It would just be a mess, and it wouldn't really work. It's like if you've got a box and you press a button and it doesn't do anything. You open the box at the back, and you just having stuff falling towards you, and you notice that nothing is fitting, nothing is connected to each other. It makes absolutely no sense.
Right, and so what happens with most organizations is that's what they do. They do what I just described, and then they go, core values, they're important because you can't say they're not important because we know intuitively that they're important, but they don't know what to do with them. And so what my book does is it goes very deep, and it says, look, the discovery process is a fairly well-worn path. I would guess that any company that has done what I just reflected on a moment ago, if they do the discovery process, they will come up with what's important to them. And generally speaking, where they fall short, and to answer your question, is most of the time, if what I tell people is this, I give them permission. I say core values don't need to be nice, I'll repeat that. Core values don't need to be nice, and I say that because it's a provocative statement, and because it makes a point that you are what you are. And what I say is the core values are the personality of the organization. They're the essence of the organization. If you're an asshole organization, yeah, that's just what you are. I mean, you can try to change, but if you want to be that, if you don't want to change and that's what you are, then I say, fine, own it. Be unapologetic about it. Don't surprise people with it. And so what I tell people, and I'm saying this because not to say that really exists. It probably does to a small degree, but in general, most companies want to do the right thing, and they want to provide a good service, and they want to treat their customers well, and they want their team to enjoy working there. But what they do is they come up with these very generic core values that if I read theirs versus the guy across the street, they sound the same. And what I say is you have to, when you go to do the discovery process, and Jim Collins and Jerry Porras talk about this in their book, Built to Scale, that you need to pick what does the company stand for at its deepest core? What are the top 3 to 6 values that they will never negotiate with? That if they have to lose money over making those come true over the long run, they'll probably be willing to lose money. They should be willing to lose money for it, or not be in business. And so when you have that type of conviction around your values, you now have something valuable to work with. What happens next, though, is most people take that, they drop it on their team's lap, and they go back to work, and it doesn't do anything, to my point earlier. What I say, and where my book really goes really, really deep, and where it presents a new idea, is around the idea of using design to create viral, sticky values, values that are going to be used in the organization, values that have high utility value, values that the entire organization is going to use consistently. And that comes down to design. That's the difference between an iPhone and maybe an old Nokia phone, is they're both great phones, but one is designed to do one thing and one's designed to do something else. So the design matters. And I always say I'm a CEO, but I really consider myself a designer. And I believe that we need to be really intentional and really, really, really thoughtful about how we design our core values, and then how we design them to be used in the organization, and then how do we design the organization. And I say that starts and ends with core values.
Yes, that actually fits because I just had an idea, and whilst you were talking, I just checked out something. You mentioned that you are based in Austin, Texas, and the thing is, the airline Southwest.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, and they are in Denver. They are they are practically the Ryanair of the United States.
Correct.
So yeah, and I was just looking and I thought, what are actually their core values? And I got to find out here the Southwest Airlines values are warrior spirit, servant's heart, and fun living or loving attitude, which is an interesting thing, of course, when you think of it and compare it with other business and that. Think, okay, how do they actually live it and how does it get them profitability? Just as an example, for instance, what do you think about that?
Well, I actually think that they're a really good example of well-designed core values. So when I look at I've actually not read their core values before. So when we were reading them, I did two things. First of all, I was listening to how do they claim their values? What do they claim them to be? So warrior spirit. What was the second one?
Servant's heart and fun-loving attitude.
Right. And so when you look at that, two things stand out to me. First of all, those values, what does warrior spirit mean? It means being passionate, right?
Exactly.
Okay. What does servant's heart mean? It means having a service orientation and love, right?
Yeah.
And then fun-loving attitude is fun. So we're really talking about, 3 or 4 different values. The themes, so I say you need to figure out your theme. You don't just say, what's our core value, and say warrior spirit. You say, well, we're very passionate about what we do. And then those need to be translated. So this is a perfect example of an organization that has really well-designed core values. They took passionate, service orientation, and fun, and they translated those into what I call, in the book, we call them headers. The header for passionate is warrior spirit. So they translated it into the tone of the organization and in a way where it's interesting, it's viral, and it's sticky. I've never spent 1 minute of my day ever working at Southwest Airlines. I didn't know what their core values were until 2 minutes ago, but I can remember them right now. Warrior spirit, servant's heart, fun-loving attitude. I didn't read them, by the way. I just said them off the top of my head because they're easy to remember. The second thing I would say is, so they did a great job of translating them into really sticky, viral, tonal headers. The headers are in the tone of their culture. And when you do that, my book, really what it says is I have one core belief, and this is a great example. I'm so glad you brought this up, Christian. I say that core values have the opportunity to become the language of the organization. And when you use the right language, which they did, they've now defined to the world and to their team what their language is. And the book essentially says that our language then contributes to the conversations we have in the organization and outside of the organization. Our conversations equals our actions equals our results. If our core values equals our language, which equals our conversations, then our core values equal our results. So all the results, good, bad, or indifferent, in our organizations and in our lives is a direct correlation to the core values that we use in our language. And so the second thing I'll mention, and in my book I talk about this, is there's this law called Miller's Law. Miller's Law was brought forth by a guy out of Princeton in 1956, and it's around the psychology of memory. And what Miller says, and the conclusion he came to, and Miller's Law is really interesting because it's baked into literally every microchip processor in the world is based on Miller's Law. It's the science of memory. And so Miller's Law says the human brain can remember 7 items plus or minus 2 very quickly and easily. Well, when we look at warrior spirit, servant's heart, and fun-loving attitude, how many words is that?
I would say maximum, all in total, maybe 6.
Yeah.
If we give it short and sweet.
Right. So fun-loving, whether that's 1 or 2 words, if it's 2 words, that's 7 words, which is exactly aligned with Miller's Law. So those are the 2 things that jumped out at me when you told me. As I said, they converted the themes into words that represent their organization, and then they fell directly into Miller's Law. And going back to what I said earlier about Jim Collins and Jerry Porras, they have 3 values. And they did a study over a very long period of time of iconic visionary companies. And where they landed was iconic visionary companies generally have between 3 and 6 values. So they're using these best practices. They don't try to stand for everything. They're standing for what's most important to them, and then they make that come to life in their policies and procedures, their actions, their execution model, their strategic model. And when you do that, what you do is you start to supercharge your organization. You start to attract people that want to be a part of that type of place where it's very obvious what you are. And that resonates with certain people. You want the right people to show up. You want the wrong people to never show up or to leave once they find out where they're at. Preferably they never show up. But by getting this real straight and by living this and bringing this life in the organization, what they do is 3 things. Number one, it creates the ultimate decision-making engine is what I say in the book. And what that means is when we're living our values, are we living warrior spirit? Are we living servant's heart? Are we living fun-loving attitude? And they can make decisions based on that. There's a second part that we didn't go into, and I don't have the values up in front of me, but what I say is you need to have what's called a descriptive under the value. The only thing you really want the team to remember is, again, warrior spirit, servant's heart, and fun-loving attitude. You want them to remember the header, but you need to have a description under that. And usually that's 4 to 8 sentences that say, well, what does warrior's spirit mean? What does servant's heart mean? What does it look like when fun-loving attitude is alive and well in the organization? And what you're doing then is you're not letting people tell you what it means. You're telling them what it means. And I call that a descriptive. And the book dives deep into how do you design that? Because this is all about design. I'm trying to design the language for the organization. I'm trying to design the accountability of the organization. And I'm trying to design the expectation that people can then come back to if they don't know what to do. And when you do that, what ends up happening is you end up creating, sorry, I just saw you brought it up. So the golden servant's heart, follow the golden rule, treat others with respect, and embrace our Southwest family. Fun-loving attitude, be a passionate team player, don't take it too seriously. Warrior spirit, strive to be the best, display the sense of urgency, and never give up. So I say you should maybe go a little deeper. That could be maybe like a subheader. I would make it 4 to 8 sentences so you could really say what it means, so you could start to drive behavior and operationalize it into the business. But that's all around design. These are designed. When I read those core values for Southwest, I know what they stand for. I understand them much better. And when you do that, it creates what I call invisible scale in the organization. And what invisible scale does is they can grow organically because the right people show up and they do the right things naturally because they understand what the expectations are intuitively. They don't need to. I don't need a policy and procedure to tell me what a fun-loving attitude is. It's don't be an asshole. Be nice to people, right? And so here's where organizations fall short is they'll have a core value like fun-loving attitude, and they'll let people stick around that don't exude that attitude. Well, you can't do that either. That's got to be a filter for decision making. I got someone that shows up when they're a jerk. Sayonara, you're out. Get out of here. You're not allowed to be here. So you got to be disciplined about it. But yeah, when you do those 2 things, what ends up happening is you create a magnet for talent. The right people start to show up because they know that this is what Southwest stands for. I want to be a part of this because we as human beings, we want to be a part of something greater than ourselves. And so the core values provide language to do that.
Exactly. And that's so interesting because I just was looking at Ryanair's values, and they don't really have much of a distinction, not as Southwest. But nevertheless, their quote is like low price, value for money, and efficiency are the core values of Ryanair if you get all their core things in. Because people, what do they want? They want to get from A to B for the lowest fare, safely, and of course, fast. And that's something that, of course, Southwest has a similar approach, but they have this fun attitude, which is a bit very different, of course, again, and fitting more to the environment where they are.
Yeah, I would argue that Ryanair is just telling you the features and benefits of their business, and they care about efficiency. That might be one of them, but low cost, that could be one either. That could also be one, but how does that drive behavior in the org? That's my issue with those values. Is my goal with values is to create a language for the organization, and that's a 3 bullet points under like what you are.
Exactly.
And they're features and benefits. They're not. There's nothing emotional. Like, no one's going to make an emotional connection to that. No one's going to go work for Ryanair because it says those things. No, you're competing on price, which is fine, and maybe that's all they care about. But you're not going to get the right people to show up because you have that in your. In fact, you may get the wrong people to show up because you're going to pay people less, right? So, I would argue that they have not done a good job of saying what their values are, because I think when values are done well, they really say what you care about as an organization, and they get the right people to show up, and they create a language for the organization. And when I hear that, I go, it just didn't say much to me,
Yes, and it's very much in tone of O'Reilly, the group CEO, who is actually very much about figures. He likes to keep the costs down as his core focus on growth. But nevertheless, seems obviously that he has a different kind of internal core value or emphasis compared to the CEO and the founders of Southwest Airlines, which is very different. But nevertheless, they are sort of equal to each other in their regional context.
I would be curious what the difference in profitability is between those two airlines.
Yeah, I'm just looking here because I've been reading a lot about both airlines, and Southwest at the moment, just as a comparison, they've got 740 aircraft, and Ryanair has at the moment about just over 450 aircraft. 70% is owned by them, so that they have a good financial state and can compete quite profitably compared to other airlines that are like Lufthansa and British Airways or Air France and so on, that have, of course, a much higher cost area, not only higher salaries, but they have as well a lot of aircraft in leasing contracts, and that costing them a lot of money. When you think of it, many of these big airlines have got all the aircraft standing there, and they can't deliver really value to their clients because the clients are becoming unhappy because they can't really fly. But planes like Ryanair, for instance, they are still commuting, and their aircraft is, I would say, from what I've heard from different people I know who've been flying now, they've been paying like about $15 for a trip that would take about an hour flight,
right?
Which is extremely low when you compare it with the rest of the market. If I do the same flight with a different airline in Europe, I'd pay at least $120 just for one person, and that's crazy.
So check this out. Despite their differences, I just looked this up. Despite these differences, both airlines had the same operating margin in 2019. That's interesting. Southwest 2019 annual net income was $2.3 billion, with an operating margin at 13.2%. Total revenues reached $22.4 billion, almost 3 times more than Ryanair's $8.5 billion. So they're bigger, but yeah, I'd be curious to see, are they making the same amount of money? This year is obviously hard to tell, right, because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
But they have the same operating margin, which is so that's a win. That's good. So maybe they've done a good job with those core values, to your point, and they have a CEO that's all about the numbers. Then they are saying that. I argue that maybe there's different ways to win. My take is people want to be motivated, though, but there's different ways to win.
Exactly, and depends as well very much who you are targeting in that. An interesting thing enough is Ryanair was actually modeled on the example that Southwest has, because both CEOs had been in exchange like 20 years ago, and one learned from the other how to do the business even more profitable. And they obviously have been exchanging as well ideas and that, which is good for both airlines, because you need to have this exchange as well of ideas in the industry, especially as they are targeting different places. They are in different markets, but their key objective is similar. And so they have similar approaches. But of course, Ryanair is a more European addressing style, with the Irish component, and the other one is more let's say Americanized. It's been localized to fit more the context of the US market, which is quite good when you think of it. Southwest has over 46,000 employees, which is a good number compared to some of the industries in other areas. For instance, if you compare some aircraft, let's say automotive manufacturers, some of these manufacturers that produce cars, they're even smaller, and they don't have that kind of profitability range at that low cost.
Sure.
And that's the thing. When you think of it, companies that really want to excel, especially now, we have to somehow differentiate. Sometimes we can differentiate by price. Sometimes we have to combine it as well with value somehow, because you want to get the right people to work for you, and it's no point getting people in, hiring people, and then having to lay them off again because you notice they're not right fit. And if you, as you said, if you are able actually to attract from the beginning the right people, the right staff, and the right people in context of customers, and that's a perfect ideal situation then.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So thinking of that, how could the process of building a core value driven organization look like?
So going back to what I was saying earlier is there's really most organizations, they do the discovery process. They have a mediocre rollout at best where they introduce the values to their team, and the implementation process thereafter is probably minimal, if any. Mm-hmm. That's pretty standard. And there's some data out there by Gallup that says that 89% of companies, that they interviewed, less than 11% all the team members knew the values. So and there was a bigger study that was done, and they started bucketing them in 0 to 20%, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 100%. Only 11% of companies had 80% or more of their employees know the values. When you go down to 60% or more, only 22% of companies. So that's a reflection of what I just said. Companies don't do a good job of building values that are going to be used in the organization, and they do a pretty poor job of making them come to life in the organization. What my belief is that, and I took a different approach, and this was through trial and error, Christian. Basically, I figured out that most of these organizations, something's wrong here. And I had an experience where I was around a lot of people who were very accomplished entrepreneurs, but none of them knew half of them didn't know their own core values in the company. And that's what I find also, is I do this whenever I speak on the subject. I do a poll, and I ask everyone to stand up if their company has core values. And then I say, stay standing if you can tell me your core values right now off the top of your head. These are the CEOs of their companies. And 10 out of 10 times I've done this, half the room sits down when I ask that question. And then I say, please stay standing if your employees know your core values. Half of the remaining half will sit down. And then I say, stay standing if you promote your core values to your customers. And usually there's only a couple people standing at that point. So it's not a very well used structure, or asset in most organizations. And what I say is that the discovery process is a well-worn path. Figuring out what the themes that you stand for, there's a lot of good ways there's a lot of well-developed ways of doing that. There's lots of consultants and people you can hire, and they can help you do that. There's nothing new from me on that subject. Where I think I provide a lot of value with my book, The Core Value Equation, is that I say, look, once you discover, you have to design them for use. We need to design them intentionally for high utility value inside and outside the organization. So discover, design, and then what I say is you need to have a very immersive rollout. And in chapter 6 of my book, we go deep. I give you everything. How do you do a rollout? And we spend a lot of time, money, and energy working with a coach on how to do this. You want to immerse the team in the language of the organization. You want to make it interactive. You want to make it about them, not about the company, because we want them to buy into it. And you want to give them an opportunity to have their voice be heard when it comes to what these values look like and how they're going to come to life in the organization. So again, discover, design, rollout. Next, and I jokingly call the rollout a core value wedding, because it's a one-day event. You do it, and then they're in the organization. Once you do that, then it's implementation, ongoing implementation. I call that the core value marriage. And, it's not like when you get married, you have your wedding and then you never talk to your wife again. If you do that, I can promise you, you're probably not going to be married for very long. So discover, design, roll out, and implement are the first 4 steps to making the core values come to life. And then my question is this, and you'll appreciate this, I believe. Well, why do any of this at all? And my answer is I want ROI, but you have to measure for ROI. So I created a whole measurement system, same as you would measure profitability in your organization or productivity. We want to measure for what I look for is loyalty and engagement. And so the 2 tools I like for that are Net Promoter Score, which is Bain's tool, eNPS, Employee Net Promoter Score, which is also Bain's tool. That's measuring loyalty internally. And then I like to use Gallup's Q12, which is Gallup's engagement tool. So we measure that in the organization on a quarterly basis anonymously. And we want to get a sense for what's happening in the organization. And we start to look and we start to take those measurements and we take the data and we compare it against more traditional KPIs. So again, going back to what I said earlier, discover, design, roll out, implement, measure for efficacy, do that, and then you just iterate as you do that to make it more alive and well in the organization. And if you do that, I believe that if you follow the steps we outline in the book, then at least my experience has been that you end up with a very you end up with a core value driven organization and a very engaged audience. That's been my experience.
Mm-hmm. And so, how does this then actually translate to the customer side? Because of course, one thing is, of course, we get our employees to understand what the core values are, to know what the core values, and then as well to take them into their own heart to say, that's me, and I stand as well with this, and that's us. Because otherwise, of course, if they don't know about it, they don't know how to live by it. But how about the customers? How do we get those customers actually to understand it and to know about it? What's the experience? What's the best practice to do that?
Yeah. So what I believe is that how you are inside is how you are outside. And so by getting your team to do the right things internally, the result will be that the customers will get the experience you're designing for them. So by designing my employee experience, I am essentially designing my customer experience. I think a lot of people get that wrong, and they focus externally, and they do it backwards. They focus on the customer and not the employee. And I think it's the other way around. I want to focus on the employee, and then they'll make sure the customer gets taken care of. So Mercedes calls it customer one, which is the first customer is the employee. And so I believe that if you want to have a great customer experience and you want people coming back and raving about you and bringing you more business, you got to take care of the people who are going to be working with them, which is the team.
Yeah, so then they actually live it and you partly experience it. Like, for instance, you just see at some airlines, for instance, like Virgin, for instance, Virgin Atlantic, even Virgin Trains and all these different places, businesses that are based on the core values that Richard Branson himself as well lives and sees as his values. How he does his business is very much different than other entrepreneurs who maybe have other core values. And they eventually, especially if the business is driven by an entrepreneur, the core values of the entrepreneur partly will as well translate into the business, and the business eventually will translate into the employee, as you say. And that attracts a certain kind of clientele.
Yeah, you have to kind of you are who you are as an entrepreneur and as a person. So there's different global mindsets. So you have people like Branson that has more a pluralist mindset, right, where he wants to make it all about the people, and I'm more in that camp. You don't have to have that mindset. My main thing is don't lie about what you are. Don't say I'm all about the people, but you're all about you're not. You're all about the bottom line, right? Go out there and be authentic and say what you are, and people will know where they're showing up to. And if they know where they're showing up to, they'll give you their all, even if they don't, even if you're not putting their interests above everyone else's. I don't think that's the best practice, but I want my team to know where they're showing up, and I don't want them to find out after they get there. And then I want to hold them accountable to that standard, and so there's consistency. And when I do that, what ends up happening is the team understands where they're working, and the team understands who they're working for, and the team understands the culture, and they can buy into it and perform in a way that's expected. And people just want to know what the expectations are. They want to know where the boundaries are. So Brands is a good example of someone that puts his people first. I think you get more out of people by putting them first because they're going to give – people usually reciprocate. There's a law of reciprocation, right? The theory of reciprocity. If I give, people usually give back, right? And so and there's a lot of data around there that shows that highly engaged employees, when you look at what they're looking for, they want to know that their opinion counts. They want to be trained. They want to be given the resources to do their job well. They want to be, get recognition for a job well done. They want to, have friends at work. We spend most of our time waking time at work. Why is it suddenly we're going to be different than we are in our personal life? We're not. We're all the same either way. And so I think if you cater to that to a certain degree, not without an expectation of something in return, but I believe if you cater to that, people will give you more because they feel loved and they feel like they're cared for. And I don't know. I just look at the best relationships I have, and it's a give from both people. And when you do it the other way, where it's no, you show up for a paycheck and you better do X, Y, and Z, and if you don't, I'm going to fire you, then that's a breach of trust. And, people will typically give you the minimum that you need to keep their job, and they'll keep their options open because it's not a really great relationship. So I'm a firm believer, and the data out there shows that if you want that highly engaged employees generally outproduce disengaged and or neutral employees by 21% productivity. So for me, I'm like, that's the last 21% of someone's productivity is the most profitable dollars you're going to bring into your business. And if I'm getting 21% more over a benchmark, that's all profit as far as I'm concerned. Your last dollars of profit are always your most dollars of profit. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, so that would be like an alignment of the most powerful tools that we can use in the organization. So for instance, what are the different tools that they can use not only to get these core values and translate them and to get them really sticking in the minds of people, besides as well conveying them to the people who we want to have as clients?
So I think that there's really, it goes back to what I said before. You have to discover the right core values, be authentic to what you are as an organization. You then need to design them for high utility value. Excuse me. So again, you need to discover the right core values that are authentic to the organization. You need to design them for high utility value so they can become sticky and viral in the organization once they're introduced to the organization. You need to introduce them the right way to get people bought into them. You then need to implement them on an ongoing basis, and last but not least, measure for ROI. At the fourth step, implementation, what I say is, if you did three things and only three things, I would say roll them out the right way, put them up all over the place so people could see them, and last but not least, build some sort of storytelling around your values. So an example of that might be, we in my business at the Money Source, the company I just exited, we did a thing where we would ask a question once a week, and then it became once every other week because we had so many employees. And once we got to almost 1,000 employees, it was hard to manage. So we'd ask them a question. We say, what is one core value one of your coworkers lived this week? Who's the coworker? What's the value? And how did they live it? And then we would compile all that information and we'd share it with everyone. So I call that core value storytelling, because what I'm forcing them to do is to think in terms of the values, to give credit to someone else for their behavior that aligns to the core values, and then to acknowledge that person. And when you do that on a regular basis, what you're doing is you're giving your team an opportunity to play with the values. And the more they play with it, the more comfortable they get with them. And the more comfortable they get with them, then the more accepting they are of them. And so going back to what I just said a moment ago, it's all about making it into the language of the organization. That takes time. But once it's there, it's like anything else. If I'm in the United States, if I move to a country that doesn't speak English, sooner or later, I'm going to speak that language because I'm going to be around it, immersed in it. And the organization's no different. If I teach them how to speak the language, the next person that shows up, they're going to show up and they're going to hear a language being spoken, and they're going to pick it up and they're going to start to learn it. And going back to what I said earlier in the show, I believe that core values can be the language of the organization, and our language equals our conversations equals our decisions equals our actions, and our actions equal our results. So therefore, core values equals results.
Yeah, so it was great having you here on the show, Darius. Where can people find your book?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, and it's therealdarius.com, THEREAL, Darius, DARIUS.com. And there's a link in there to buy the book. It's for sale on Amazon and on every continent, so you can get it pretty easily. You can also get it on Audible, and you can get it on Kindle and ebook. So it's on all the ebooks. It's on all the audiobooks, and you can get hardcover, softcover. So it's everywhere books are sold, online as well.
Great. Awesome. So I'm sure they'll enjoy reading it, and we'll surely be as well in the future be talking about as well other topics in relation to the core values, and I'm sure as well about your book in the future.
Great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Growth Zone with Christian Bartsch. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review or rating here on iTunes or on podchaser.com. If you found the content helpful, then share it on social media. I would like to invite you to follow our show so that you don't miss the upcoming interviews with leaders in the market. Simply visit the website follow.prmediareach.com. I will be adding the link also to the description of this episode so that you just need to click on that link. For those of you who are listening and signing up to follow the show, I have reserved a free copy of the ultimate guide on content marketing. This is the strategy that got me top corporate clients like McDonald's, Linde, Hewlett-Packard, Deutsche Bank, Volvo, and many others. That strategy has been working for over 10 years. It also got me contracts with police, transport authorities, military, and several universities, and even leading research institutes. For sure, it also worked wonders as it got me many small, medium-sized entrepreneurs and enterprises as clients. And that even included international clients from all around the world. The link to sign up for our free broadcasting service and the guide is follow.prmediareach.com. That will give you access to the most recent version of my ultimate guide on content marketing. You can follow me as well on Twitter by using the Twitter handle CAP_Bartsch. That's spelled Charlie, Alpha, Papa, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Tango, Sierra, Charlie, Hotel. Yes, that is CAP_Bartsch. Charlie, Alpha, Papa, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Tango, Sierra, Charlie, Hotel.